just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
Do we? Now, let's talk about what's tipping the scales of justice in the case of defendant Karen Reed. The Boston woman is accused of killing her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, and she's set to be in court today for a motions hearing. Now, her defense team wants some access to some third-party phone records. If you hear Rule 17 thrown out in the courtroom, that's the rule that governs that, because we can't just be taking people's phone records. There has to be a good reason for it. And the prosecution is saying that there isn't. They're saying that the defense team here is on a, quote, fishing expedition.
There is no suggestion of a third-party culprit, no suggestion of cover-up of evidence, no suggestion from the 13 civilians' witnesses' testimony that we've received, or transcripts of that testimony. All of them confirmed that Mr. O'Keefe never entered 34 Fairview Road. All of it was absolutely no animosity between the individuals at the Waterfall Bar or at 34 Fairview residence. There was no fight, there was no dog attack, there was no eyewitness to the circumstances that led to Mr. O'Keefe's death.
All right, that was the prosecution at last week's hearing. So let's break down more of what the prosecution is saying in response to the defense's motion to get these cell phone records. Because remember, this is the defense team who was asking for it, and the state has to respond. So I combed through their filing, and I pulled out a couple points for our discussion today. And unfortunately, we can't get to it all, but just want to hit some highlights here. I want to bring in, to help me out with this, Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson in the studio, and criminal defense and civil rights attorney Casey Early, who is standing by remotely for us. So we know that Jennifer McCabe, who is was a friend of John O'Keefe's, which I think is really important to know. She only knows Karen Reed through John O'Keefe, is going to be a big witness, and she has been the subject of a lot of discussions. Tell me a little bit about the biggest thing the defense wants out of her.
Well, really, they're trying to explain these relationships for their theory of collusion and for a cover-up. But you have the defense that is really trying to get her phone records and other people's phone records because they want to show transparency. And sure, some relationships were not disclosed, but if they're going to cooperate and hand over their phones right away, what does that tell you?
Right. Well, and it's interesting you make that point because I was stunned when I read this, and Jennifer McCabe was happy to turn over her phone for a download immediately. Okay, I'm looking at this, bottom of page 7 on the motion. Prior to Ms. McCabe entering their home and waking them up in their bedroom, her cell phone, which was downloaded by members of the Massachusetts State Police, following her signed consent, shows calls from her phone to both Nicole and Brian Albert's phones, evidencing she was not part of a cover-up. So this is huge. When they try to make her seem like she's some disingenuous witness, this is someone who was woken up in the middle of the night by Karen Reed. Karen Reed had John O'Keefe's niece call her and say, please wake up. Karen Reed was hysterical, said, can I come to your house? So that's one big thing. Now, let's talk about something else that happened when Karen Reed was home at John O'Keefe's house, because remember, she was living at his house. And Casey, I want to bring you in on this. This was something I had no idea about till I read the Commonwealth's motion, but John O'Keefe had Ring doorbell video, 2 different Ring cameras set up on the house. And there's missing video from when Karen Reed dropped him off at the party, and then when she left at 5:08 a.m. to go to Jennifer McCabe's house after she woke Jennifer up and said, you got to help me find John. Where is that video? So this motion talks about how the niece and the nephew of John O'Keefe were both interviewed and said we had no access to it, but Karen Reed did. So the state is insinuating that she got rid of this evidence. Casey, what do you think about that?
Yeah, the state is hitting back. I mean, this has been zealous advocacy on behalf of Ms. Reed. I mean, the defense have been combing through so much evidence, and then after they received the evidence from the prosecution, they filed motions stating that we're missing additional evidence, and in this case, they're asking the court to get additional witnesses access to their cell phone records because they believe that there is some type of communication or relationship between the officers and the witnesses. So the prosecution, they're not just standing and taking these punches. And that is a question that the court will need to resolve, because it shows that either she tampered with possible evidence in this case, and maybe she's not as innocent as the public may seem, and which is kind of weird because typically when you see defendants accused of murder in the court of public opinion, they're usually the ones that are not supported. So this is definitely going to play out, but I do believe they should get access to the witnesses' statements.
All right, Casey. Okay, and Matt, you had a point.
Yeah,
there.
you know, I think that Casey is making the perfect point here. You know, again, we don't have a horse in the race, right? You know,
good point. Doesn't change our lives in any way, shape, or form. What happens with this case?
But you have this case in the court of public opinion because you have those protesters and the people cheering for Karen Reed and the optics of all of this. And Casey is exactly right, because this is the first time in these huge motions that you and I have read that we're getting more details about that grand jury indictment that led to these charges after 42 witnesses and 14 days.
Right, Matt. Right. It's almost like the public got this backwards, because the defense team, and kudos to them, they wanted to kick this case before trial. And so they made every effort to try to convince the public of their narrative.
So we're getting more facts now.
The state, oh yeah, tons of facts. Read up, people, read up. I'm telling you, everybody at home who's curious about this case, look at these motions. I've got one more, a big nugget I was totally unaware of till I read this on page 22. Karen Reed goes back to the crime scene before going to Jennifer McCabe's home, according to the Commonwealth. So they have her on video at 5:08 a.m. leaving John O'Keefe's house. And then at 5:30, they know that's when she arrived at Jennifer McCabe's house. Carrie Roberts, John O'Keefe's other friend, joined them, and they all three drove over to the home that's located on, I believe it is Fairview Avenue, where the Alberts lived. So there's that period of time between 5:08 and 5:30 where there are cameras in the vicinity that see her Lexus SUV, and they check her phone records, and it lines up that she went back to that area. Why? Matt, final
Well,
word.
I think that this is going to prove conscience of guilt for Commonwealth, but defense is going to say, is it her car?
There you go. We'll leave it there for now. There's so much more. I told you we couldn't get to it all. Acacia Early, thank you so much. Matt Johnson, thank you. Again, that hearing happening today. We'll go there live together when it begins.